I finally got the Moondrop Space Travel 2 and they just released the Ultra Edition with LDAC, improved noise cancelling and a new planar driver for improved sound. Is all of that true though? Well, we'll find out today. Because today I'll be comparing the Space Travel 2 Ultra to the Space Travel 2 and the original Space Travel. I'll also be scoring and ranking them in a total of 10 categories against the best earbuds under $50 US. Now the retail price of the Space Travel 2 is $29 US, the Ultra Edition $39 US. But let's get into category 1, comfort. I'm scoring both buds a 9 out of 10, same as the Space Travel. Because it's the exact same design and ergonomics, you get the same basic plastic build across all three buds. All three buds have a similar shallow fit, so you get minimal suction and pressure in the ear canal. You get the same 4 sizes of ear tips. The only difference is the design. The Ultra comes in gray, the Space 2 comes in black or white. All right, now category 2 is the security of the fit. I keep the scoring here, so basically most buds get an 8 out of 10 unless they have a wingtip. However, do keep in mind this more shallow fit might not work for everyone when it comes to stability. Now for me, my ear canals, it just works fine. I find I barely need to readjust even throughout my weight training workouts or if I'm going for a run. But if you ever had an issue with an earbud with a more shallow fit, these might not work for you. Also keep in mind, you still don't get any dust or water resistance on any of the Space Travel earbuds. So just be cautious, like you can probably use them throughout a sweaty workout or if you get caught in the rain, just be sure to wipe them down and keep them as dry as possible. All right, category 3 is case and battery life. I'm scoring both buds a 7.5 out of 10, 1 point up from the Space Travel. So you now get an advertised 7 hours in the buds, 31 hours in total with the case. The Space Travel advertises 4 hours in the buds and 18 hours in total. So going off advertised amounts, that's a huge improvement. But Moondrop doesn't state if it's with noise cancelling on or off. I really don't like it when brands do this. So I tested all 3 buds with noise cancelling on a Nothing Phone 3A Pro using AAC at 50% volume. So the Ultra, I got 5 hours and 22 minutes. The Space 2, 5 hours and 4 minutes. The Space Travel, 4 hours and 40 minutes. So there is an improvement, just not as drastic as advertised. The total battery life is still about 25% more than the Space Travel, so you won't have to charge your case as often. There's still no fast charge or wireless charging, really not expected anywhere near this price. And you also get the same open style case, which I'm really not a fan of, but I'm sure it's cutting the cost of the buds, so take your losses, I guess. Still quite a compact case. It's actually ranked the 3rd thinnest on my ranking, but here it is compared to the thinnest case, the Soundpeats Air 4 Pro. All right, now category 4 is controls. I'm scoring both buds a 7.5 out of 10 as it's mostly the same as the Space Travel. So you get touch controls with a single, double, triple, quad tap and a long hold. The functions you see here are the functions that you get, so still no volume control sadly. You can also tap 4 times on either bud to toggle on or off the game mode. I do like that you now get a click feedback every time that you tap. It just feels more responsive and tactile, like you're actually pressing a button, not really a touch surface. Another small improvement here is the ability to change your ambient control switching. So you can choose to switch between noise cancelling on, off, or you can also add transparency mode into the mix, or just choose 2 out of those 3 options. Apart from that, it's the same with the Space Travel, so you still can't change your noise cancelling settings whilst you're on a phone call. So whatever setting you had on when you answer the call, it will be locked. After you've answered the call though, you can go into the app and change your noise cancelling settings in there. All right, now category 5 is connectivity. I've got the Space 2 with a score of 9, the 2 Ultra with a 10 out of 10. So both buds use Bluetooth 6.0, SBC and AAC, but the Ultra does have LDAC high res. Just keep in mind you can't use the LDAC with multi-point connection on. But both buds do now have multi-point connection, which the Space Travel did not. So you can have 2 devices connected to the buds at the same time. You don't even have to pause your playback on one device before playing it on the other device. Just press play on whatever device and that audio will automatically switch over and pause your other device. Now when you're using either earbud with the other in the case, that one bud is going to work in mono mode, so you hear the left and right audio channel out of that one bud. You also get a low latency gaming mode here. In my testing, Moondrop has some of the lowest latencies, so definitely suitable for even quick reaction games like shooters. All right, now category 6 is call quality, and I run through 3 tests here: a quiet room, simulation crowd noise, and a simulation windy city with construction noise. Now here are all the scores. Both buds get a 7 out of 10. The call quality is very similar to the Space Travel. With the crowd noise, the Space 2 and Space 2 Ultra might be slightly better, but I'm barely noticing much of a difference. So I'll leave you with some samples of all 3 Moondrop Space buds, as well as one of the highest scored buds, the QCY Melobuds Pro. All right, here is a Moondrop Space Travel in a quiet room. All right, here's a Moondrop Space Travel 2 in a quiet room. All right, here's a Moondrop Space Travel 2 Ultra in a quiet room. All right, here's a QCY Melobuds Pro in a quiet room. All right, now we're going to see how the microphones block out some simulation crowd noise. Alright, here's the Moondrop Space Travel with some simulation crowdness. Alright, here's the Space Travel 2 with some simulation crowdness. Alright, here's the Space Travel 2 Ultra with some simulation crowdness. Alright, here's the QC1 Nelobods Pro with some simulation crowdness. Alright, now I have some city noise, some construction noise, and some simulation wind. Alright, this is Moondrop Space Travel with some city noise, construction noise, and some simulation wind. Alright, here's the Space Travel 2 with city noise, construction noise, and some simulation wind. Alright, here's the Space Travel 2 Ultra with city noise, construction noise, and simulation wind. Alright, here's the QC1 Nelobods Pro with city noise, construction noise, and some simulation wind. All right, now category 7 is app customization and extra features. I'm scoring both buds an 8.5 out of 10, a pretty noticeable improvement over the Space Travel. The Space Travel only had 3 EQ presets and control customization, and that was it. Now the Space 2 and Space 2 Ultra give you some noise cancelling settings. You can change the ambient switching. Function settings has your LDAC and multi-point toggle. You have some gain settings in there as well now, so you can actually increase or decrease the total volume of the earbuds. Tune EQ will have your 3 EQ presets, and the online interactive EQ is very interesting. So you can basically upload your own EQ customization or download some official Moondrop EQs or EQs that other users have created. Just keep in mind, if you want to upload an EQ, you need to log in. This means you also can't save any of your own EQ presets without logging in. So you're gonna have to upload it. You can't just save it like onto the app. Like onto your own phone. But you now get a 5-band EQ here with Q factor and frequency adjustment, and it works quite well. Wrapping it up here, you have your firmware updates and a user guide. Now the user interface and smoothness of the app is still not great, but you get the main customization and some of the best sound customization in any price range. The buds that I have scored with a 9 or higher do give you a smoother user interface. The app just runs a bit better control customization. Moondrop do separate themselves with their sound customization. All right, now category 8 is noise cancelling, and I test my noise cancelling here on my soundbar. So I play simulation plain noise and crowd noise, so I get low, middle, high, consistent, and inconsistent sounds. Now here are all the scores for the buds with the plain noise and crowd noise test. Total score is the average rounded up to the nearest half. So I've got the Space 2 and Ultra with an 8.5 out of 10. Now the Ultra is advertised to be 5% stronger than the Space 2, but I really couldn't notice a difference. Even comparing both of those buds to the Space 1, it's really not a huge improvement. Still, for the price, it's decent enough noise cancelling. I did notice in my real world testing, like at the gym, trying to block out that gym music, that the Space 2 and Space 2 Ultra blocked out that like background music slightly better than the Space Travel. The white noise hiss is also minimal across all 3 buds, but do keep in mind the mics pick up wind incredibly easily, even like if you're outside on a moderately windy day. Now when it comes to EQ shift across all 3 Moondrop buds, I'm barely noticing any, so you get the same sound quality, whether you have noise cancelling on, transparency mode on, or noise cancelling off. Pretty rare to see, so kudos to Moondrop. All right, now category 9 is the transparency mode. With the scoring here, I take into account clarity, white noise, and occlusion. So here's all the scoring. Now this is quite a strange one here. So the Space 1 and Space 2 Ultra have similar clarity, but noticeable white noise. The Space 2 has worse clarity, especially with voices. They sound quite boxy, but the white noise is much lower. Now I do favor clarity with my scoring here because you just need to be able to hear your surroundings as well as possible. But do keep in mind the occlusion across all 3 buds is similar. It's not great, so I do notice quite a bit of that blocked ear effect. And when I would speak, my own voice didn't sound very natural. Like the noise cancelling as well, all 3 buds pick up wind very easily, so like usable outdoors, but if it's a windy day, you're gonna hear the microphones pick up that wind. All right, now onto the final round, sound quality. We'll start here with my max volume test. So I measured the Space 2 and Space 2 Ultra with their high gain mode on. So as you can see, it's a massive improvement over the Space Travel. Usually 114 decibels will give you more than enough volume, even if you're listening to like a video or a song that's mastered with lower volume. But now onto the sound quality itself. To keep this as simple as possible, I'm gonna talk about the sound just going off the stock tuning for each of the 3 buds. So the Space Travel and Space Travel 2 use a regular 13mm dynamic driver. The Ultra uses a 13mm planar driver. Now here's my scoring. I've got the Ultra with an 8 out of 10, the Space and Space 2 with an 8.5. So you can kind of look at it like this. The Space Travel is giving you the most exciting tuning. There's more of an emphasis on bass and the treble is a bit more crisp than the other 2 buds, but you're still getting a pretty balanced response. The Space Travel 2 to me is like a slightly more balanced Space Travel. The bass is dialed down slightly, you still get some tasteful sub bass though. The upper treble is also dialed down a bit, but with this you get slightly better separation compared to the Space Travel. The mids and upper mids have slightly more room to breathe. Now the Ultra is more of a flat tuning, at least when it comes to bass. So the bass is once again dialed down compared to the Space Travel 2. It has a more fast and punchy response, but for my taste, it's a bit lacking. The upper mids are also boosted slightly more, and it's an all-round brighter sound compared to the Space 2. So you do get some great instrument separation. I did find it slightly fatiguing compared to the Space Travel 2, and also found the sound slightly more closed in as well. So if I was to personally only choose one of the three buds, I'd actually still go for the Space Travel. I like my dynamic sound, just being honest. But like I said, the Space Travel is still balanced. I actually prefer those buds with the Bass Boost EQ preset. Makes them a little more kind of bass head certified, but still keeping them balanced, not over the top or muddy. If you do like a slightly more balanced tuning though, you're gonna love the Space Travel too. And I really like the sound as well. It's balanced, but you're still getting just enough energy with the bass and treble, so it doesn't sound lacking if you're kind of used to a more V-shaped tuning, which most consumer true RC buds kind of go for nowadays. So the stock tuning of the Space 2 is still slightly lacking when it comes to bass and treble for me. I actually found the Aria 2 Moondrop official EQ preset kind of fitted my personal taste a bit better, boosting the bass and the upper mid slightly. So you can definitely play around with the sound and get them sounding even closer to the Space Travel if you like. Now the Space 2 Ultra, it's definitely a more niche tuning. I know planar drivers do kind of excel when it comes to those higher frequencies. When it comes to lower frequencies, not so great. That's why a lot of the time they are paired with a dynamic driver as well. So this is a kind of sound if you want just precision and detail in your higher frequencies and you don't need that fuller bass response. But this unique sound kind of carries over to all three buds. Like Moondrop is bringing you a more balanced tuning, which is kind of rare, not just in this price range, but any price range in the true wireless market. Like the stock tuning on pretty much every earbud on this ranking, except the Soundpeats Air 4 Pro, are pretty much V-shaped. You can of course EQ the buds, get them to a more balanced level. But like I say, the stock tuning that you get, so the out of the box tuning, you can only really steer away from so much. So if you like a more balanced, like kind of on the natural side sound, Moondrop's gonna be the way to go. But that wraps up all 10 categories, and real quick, if you want to customize the scoring, you can check out my free spreadsheet linked below. On there, you can compare all the buds, the specifications, the core quality, and you can change the weight of each category, giving you a new custom ranking. But now the final scores are in, and the Space Travel 2 finished with 81 out of 100, the Space 2 Ultra, 82 out of 100. So you can see there, that is a huge step up from the Space Travel. Main improvements being the battery life, multi-point connection, slightly stronger noise cancelling, and EQ customization. So out of all three buds, I think the Space Travel 2 is going to be the best value pick. Since you get all the extra features missing on the Space Travel, and you still get some great sound, you get a nice stock tuning which you can customize to your liking. Like I said, the Ultra tuning is definitely more niche, but might be worth the extra money if that's what you're looking for. Now, if you are looking for a better all-rounder, the QCY Melobuds Pro do have a higher score there. You get stronger noise cancelling, some better features, more customization. But when it comes to sound, Moondrop do take the easy win. And like I said, almost all the buds on this ranking stock tuning is on the more V-shaped side, except for the Soundpeats Air 4 Pro. You can kind of EQ them and get them sounding quite balanced and also energetic, although I think they don't sell them anymore, so there's that. So again, keep in mind, Moondrop really separates themselves with their balanced sound. The overall features are still great, but if you like a bit more of an energetic V-shaped tuning, basically go for any of the other buds in that top 6. But for more on Moondrop, be sure to check out my pill review right here, their first clip on Open Earbud. So check that out, stay picky, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.